I'm so excited that you took the time to join us on the next episode of Beyond the Culture. This is the show where we embrace change and challenge cultural norms and ideals. I'm your host, Dr. David M. Walker. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Culture. Now before we get into the conversation today, and I have a special one for you, but before we get into the conversation, each week I remind you to do me a favor. I ask you to subscribe to the show. That's right, hit that subscribe button and subscribe to the show. That way each week you'll be notified when Beyond the Culture has uploaded a new episode. It doesn't matter whether you watch us on Apple or our YouTube channel, you'll be notified when Beyond the Culture is ready to be listened to. And of course, again, I always ask you to share the show. That's right, share it with your family and your friends. If you love Beyond the Culture and you listen to us each week, I'm sure someone you know in your family is going to love it too. So hit that share button and let someone else know that Beyond the Culture is on. Now, I have a special conversation today. Now, usually each week, I will either talk to a coach, an athletic director, a player. But this week, I have a special conversation with a longtime friend. Now, let me introduce him to you. His name is Ronnie Nunn. Now, Ronnie is a former National Basketball Association, that's the NBA. He's an NBA referee. Ronnie officiated in the NBA for 19 seasons, and that's 1,134 regular season games, 73 playoff games, and 4 NBA Finals games. And he also officiated in the 1996 NBA All-Star Game. Ronnie then served for 5 years as the NBA's Director of Officials. Nunn continues his career in basketball by serving as a consultant to the EuroLeague, the National Basketball League of Australia, and assists as the VP of Basketball Operations of the Basketball League, a newly established USA minor pro basketball league. Ronnie has a basketball camp called None Better Refs Camp, where he provides instruction, training, and development for enhancing the performance of basketball officials. And I'm super excited to have my friend on the show today, none other than Ronnie Nunn. Ronnie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David, for that illustrious, talk to the folks that are listening. But no big deal, except it's wonderful to be with you and to share this time with you about some successes in life amidst all the other things we both went through. And I'm happy to be with you.
Yeah, and I'm truly happy to have you on the show because, as I said, I talk to coaches, I talk to players, I talk to athletic directors, and most of the fans, most of our audience, they know about those particular groups of people because they see them all the time, they talk with them all the time, but no one ever really talks to an official, a person that's in the trenches of the game, a person who administers the game, and in effect, a person who has one of the greatest leadership positions that the game could have, and that's being in charge of how the game is played. So you're an NBA official and a former NBA official, but before we get into your NBA career, I want to go back to your start about where you come from and where did you grow up. Just talk about that for a few minutes.
Yeah, I'm from actually East New York section of Brooklyn, and grew up there. And my first love in sports was baseball. I really loved baseball. I think East New York was on the fringe of almost the Queens or something. And sometimes I used to think there was more fields and whatnot out that way. And I ended up playing more baseball. I grew up there and I ended up going to Brooklyn Tech High School, which was a very special place to go to school because it was a high academic school. And I always say I got lucky to get in and I was lucky to get out with a diploma. And being at Brooklyn Tech, I mean, the fact that I ended up later on becoming a school teacher and an administrator in the school, as you know, I had to get more degrees to get those positions. So of all my 3 degrees, the best degree I have on paper is my diploma from Brooklyn Tech because it was it was a preparation for a lot of things in life, to how to handle a lot of things, you know,
Sure.
because it was and it was a good school. It was all boys at the time, and that was cool. So, and then later on, when I got to Tech a little bit, junior high school in my area of East New York, I ended up getting involved in basketball. That came later, much later. And it was a little harder for me because I was more natural at baseball. I started so young. So, but you know, I played basketball at Tech. I played baseball at Tech. I was a pitcher at Tech, and I enjoyed that. And then I went on to George Washington University of a lot of scholarships. I became an all-city player in basketball, of all things. And the joy from baseball had kind of left. And I always kid to people and say, you know, I went to basketball because baseball has no cheerleaders. So,
I like that. That's true too.
it's true. So I see these girls all on the baseline wanting me to make this free throw, and I said, I think they all like me, man. I'm doing good. So, but anyway, that's how the transfer went from baseball to basketball. And I think after basketball at GW, which was a good place to go, for an academic school, my coach was very involved in making sure that we weren't going to basketball facilities that just pushed out basketball. He was concerned about our education. And actually, Shelley Schneider, who was the coach at that time, who also knew Howie Jones, who was very conscientious at Boys High. I know that's your alma mater.
Yeah.
They were close friends, and those kind of men were looking for players to go to schools that could help them. You know, even if it were in basketball, it still had a base of education, and they produced some good people. So, you know, Brooklyn Tech never had what Boys had, because Boys High School, which is now Boys and Girls, took on a community of folk, where Tech took people from all over. Right. But because Tech took people from all over the city, I began to have friends, you know, basketball friends from the team and others that lived in 5 boroughs. I mean, I never would have gone to the Bronx or Manhattan to visit or play ball in a playground with them, because, you know, we're most involved in our immediate area. So that's how my basketball life came. And then I went to play a little bit overseas. I played in Mexico because I was still vying to try to get in the NBA. But the real interesting thing about my entire life in sports is I was always stopped by an injury or an illness.
Wow.
It was kind of unusual. I know you had that situation with your potential tryout with the Dodgers when you got hurt with an ankle injury. And I always got hurt or got ill at the point when I was really at a good place to do my basketball stuff. And even in the end of my 19 years in the NBA came from an injury to my knee, and I couldn't continue. I was very thankful that they really transferred me right into administration. I think all my schooling, I think my background as an African-American man, as well as having an Italian mom, I think all those things added to my understanding of culture and understanding differences and just understanding my role in life. Apart from sports, was always conscientious about the culture of our country and the culture of places I went that I had never gone before. But my dad was not in favor of me going anywhere south of Jersey to play basketball as an African-American man. So, you know, he always kept that sense of knowledge from me. So I know where I was going, who I was going to deal with, and try to recognize, get a gift from above, to have the gift of discernment about those who you can trust and those that you don't think you can trust. And so that's a whole quick story of ball of wax. I'm sorry it took so long.
No, that's great, because as you were talking, it keeps showing me how much you and I really have in common. As you said, right before my opportunity to play with the Dodgers, I broke a leg, and you know, and you're right. It always seems like when you're right there for something happens, negative to you. But also, here's what we also have in common is, we started out as baseball players.
Right.
Yeah, we started out as baseball players. I played baseball and you played baseball. And then at some point we had a shifting into officiating. I refereed basketball for 25 years at the Division I level. You made it to the NBA. But I want to get into how did the passion develop for you? I know how I got into it. Officiating. One day I was in college and I'm walking down the hall as a freshman, and I saw a sign that said "Earn Money" with a question mark. and I was supposed to report to a certain room. It happened to be the recreation office, and I walked in because I was broke, 18, 19 years old, didn't have any money. Walked in and said, "How can I earn some money?" And they talked about getting involved with officiating. So that was really my start to getting into it. And so, what was your passion? What caused you to start having a passion for officiating basketball?
That's a good question. It came out of the blue. What happened was I started playing in the New York City Pro-Am League. And I played after coming back from Mexico because I told you about illness. I had contracted hepatitis in Mexico.
Wow.
So I had to really cool out and some other things because I didn't stop. I had opportunities for tryouts. I didn't rest my body. And then, of course, other things that began to occur as a result of that. So I really had to have a two-year just respite from sports at any type, even running. I couldn't even run to get in shape because my body would change and I'd have these problems liver-wise or kidney-wise. So I thought I was really not going to be able to do much. Well, anyway, long story short, after about 2.5 years, I started just shooting around a little bit to play, and I ended up going to the Pro-Am to play for one of the teams that they had there. And then while I was there, getting my health back and noticing that my body was recovering okay to get around a little bit here and play a little ball again and teach school. I was also coaching at Pace University. I was the assistant coach at Pace because I was in a special ed school district in Pleasantville. And at that school district, there wasn't sports so much for the young people. So I got a call and said, there's a guy, Stu Whitner, coaching at Pace. He needs some help. Okay. And it was really right in the same little town. So it was great to teach special ed youngsters and then to go and teach the talent of basketball people at Division II at Pace. So when this gentleman, Cecil Watkins, came to me and said, "Hey, what are you doing? What do you think about reffing?" I was like, "Reffing?" I said, "No." I said, I'm just finishing this second master's and I'm teaching at school and I'm also coaching at Pace. I really don't have time." Now I'm thinking he's talking high school,
right?
High school referee, and I said, "No." He says, "No, I'm talking the NBA," and I put like this cross of my fingers up and said, Hold it, step back. I don't want to be involved with any pie in the sky deal again with the NBA. I got ill. I'm recuperating. I'm not thinking about that." He said, "Well, the NBA needs good referees, and the NBA also is trying to see if some players, former players of whatever level, can transfer their skill set into officiating." I said, "Well, I'm not your guy because I got to stay away from that." Well, the next year that I played in the Pro-Am, he came at me again. The next year I played in the Pro-Am, he came at me a third time. Now I was 30 years old because I was 28, 29, 30 in the Pro-Am playing, and my health was coming back really good. And he finally, said to me, you gotta try this. I said, "Mr. Watkins, you're talking about the highest level, and I don't know anything about officiating. I mean, I get it, I understand it from playing, but I don't know anything about it." He said, "Well, that's the best thing about it." I said, "How could that be the best?" He says, "You have no bad habits,
right?
And you're fertile to learn all that we have. Now, the only thing is, you got to have talent. If you have the talent, we can teach you." And at that time, there was a gentleman working under him named Sylvester Dobson. You may know that name.
Sure, absolutely.
And Sylvester was also a school teacher in his real life, and he was very prominent in teaching and officiating. So between Cecil Watkins and Sylvester Dobson, I went home and told my wife, I said, "There's something about this that sounds a little interesting. I'm healthy. I've never thought about it. I'm continuing in coaching, but I don't know. All of a sudden, we'll see what happens." Well, 2 years of the Pro-Am. I remember in my first year, the Pro-Am also had a team in Paterson, New Jersey, a very good league. There was a Pro-Am league in Jersey. And Cecil had come to the game, and I thought I had a great game. First year, at the end of the first year, a playoff game. And I said, "Well, what do you think?" He said, "Well, you did a good job, but there's some things you got to work on, this, that, and the other." And I said, "Well, what can I get out here for the tryout?" He says, "You're not ready." So when he told me I'm not ready, in our minds sometimes we think we're ahead of things.
Sure.
And we have a good mentor that can slow us down. So long story short, he said, you're not ready yet. And I went one more year with the Pro-Am, and he said to me, "You're now ready." And that's when I went to get the invitation on my own dime.
Okay.
Chicago on my own dime. That's how it worked at that time. And Daryl Garrettson was the head of the officials of the NBA at the time. And he saw me. And obviously Cecil must have been saying something, because I remember the amount of people was a whole lot. And he said, "You have the third game, second quarter." I said, "Oh my goodness, I'm gonna be sitting on this grandstand for a long time." We were at a college, I can't recall what it is now, and they had this tournament. And all of a sudden, after the second quarter, they were playing in quarters, not like a game, but it was a combine type of thing, what we call a combine today. So all of a sudden, Cecil waved me down and he said, "Get your stuff on right now." I said, I'm supposed to be in the third game, so get your stuff on right now. So I got my stuff on right now, and I went out there, and each official worked 5 minutes of the quarter. It was a 10-minute quarter. So I worked 5 minutes. I'd look in the stands, and I would see Garrettson laughing, kicking his foot up, talking to Fred Barracat, who was a big guy at the ACC, and you know those people.
Absolutely.
And so I said, "Cecil, I did. I don't. How did I do?" He said, "You did fine." I said, I said, "Okay, so what's the story?" I said, "This guy wasn't even looking at me." He said, "Oh no, he saw you. You don't need but 2 seconds to see some potential."
Right.
And he said the real killer was Fred Barracat said to him, "Well, if you don't take him, I'm going to take him." And that was my only moment about college, you know.
Right.
So I'm lucky Fred was there. And of course, I worked for Fred later on as a consultant for the SEC and the ACC teaching as an NBA referee. So good enough, I went to LA. I was inserted into the CBA, which is the G League of today, the Continental Basketball Association, and 2 years later. So I was in the NBA. So from 30 years old to 34, you're a lot smarter. You don't take things for granted. You know 30s are an important time in a man's life, if he's, or maybe anyone's life, to make things, see where you can launch to in life.
That's right.
And in my case, from years 30 to 34, I got in very quickly. And then I started learning about culture of officiating. So I'll stop right there.
All right. So yeah, before you get into that, for those of you who are just tuning in to Beyond the Culture, my guest today is Ronnie Nunn, former NBA referee. He's our guest today, and we're enjoying this conversation. Before you get into actually getting into the league, I want to tell you a little story about the first time I met you. And as I said before we came on, I'm assuming it was 1984, because that might have been your first year in the NBA.
Yeah.
And I was a young official sitting in a class at St. John's Rec. I had just started getting into officiating, and some names from my past, like a Jerry Harper and a Pedro Violette and let's see, Buddy Keaton. If you remember those names, they were gentlemen who helped me get started in officiating. And we're in this room, young officials, aspiring officials, and we start to hear this buzz on the outside, some milling around, and you know, we hear just it was something going on that was disrupting the meeting. And all of a sudden, they started to say, "Oh, Ronnie Nunn is here, and he just got into the NBA."
Oh, okay.
So you came into the room that day as just being hired as an NBA official. And of course, this was the first time I laid my eyes on you. And you're telling us, and we all became inspired from that day listening to you. But that was the very first time in that meeting, at St. John's Rec Center, you walked in the room. You had just gotten a call. I guess it was during the summer. You had just gotten a call, and you were on your way to the NBA. So what was that like for you, getting that call and knowing that you are now on your way to the NBA as an official?
Well, it was a very shocking call because I knew I had limited experience. I kept thinking, I got limited experience. This has got to take a long time. But thank goodness for the progressive thinking of the Garrettsons and the Watkins, to where my training was going to continue, even though, and obviously you know as well as I do, that the training never ends, even though you,
right.
you get to a certain point, you got to get better to continue to stay there.
Mm-hmm.
So what was very interesting about that is I was traveling from Brooklyn in 1984, working in this special ed school district in Pleasantville, New York, which is a good hour and 15 minutes, 20 minutes drive. And so I had been doing that. And I decided to move to where I live currently in Danbury, Connecticut, because it was a shorter ride. So we got to find something. We got to live, you know. And then they was talking about Connecticut. I said, man, I'm a New Yorker. I'm not going to Connecticut. But the taxes were less.
That's crazy
in Connecticut. And of course, I had met a few teachers that were New Yorkers prior in this system, and they lived in Connecticut then. And so it was the easier thing to do. So in July, we bought a home in 1984. And we passed, you know, the mortgage, and we got through the mortgage and all of that. And then in August, I got this call to leave my field and go into the NBA. Now, the part that was really funny, which would raise your eyebrow, was my wife says, okay, so, you know, is this cool? I said, yeah, I guess I'm in. I mean, I can't believe it. She says, okay. I said, there's a problem. I said, so what's the problem? I said, what did we make last year as a school teacher? And you, because I kept her home for the kids early on.
Okay, sure.
I was hustling. I had a couple of things I was doing, as I told you, pace and all this other. And she said, well, 38,000. I said, yeah, but they're signing all the new people that are coming in, which is only me and another guy. Bernie Fryer came back. He had been recently fired and then rehired through Darryl. The salary is 28. And I got to give 2,000 to the union. She said, oh my God. She says, you're going to have to do something after the season. I said, no kidding. I'm going to have to get back in the school business and see if these folks are going to take me. So that was the biggest hurrah. The hurrah was I'm in. The other part was, wow, you know, I would have never got this house on 28, you know?
Exactly.
I got it on 38. So, you know, that was the big, it was a high and a low and a fear. There was a fear at that time, but it was outstanding. And, you know, it was some people that knew me, that knew my wishes to be involved in the NBA as a player, said, you know, you finally got there. And I said, you know, I never thought about it. And I think a lot of young people don't think about all the various things around the game of basketball, even though it could be at the professional level, whether you want to be a writer, whether you want to be in medicine, whether you want to be in training, whether you want to be in officiating, whether you want to be in coordinating, you know, so many various branches to the trunk of the basketball tree at any level for that matter.
That's right.
It is opportunity to stay in the game. So all of a sudden I was in the game, and it wasn't until later on, maybe 3 or 4 years later, that I really felt almost like I was playing.
Okay.
Because I could feel the game at that point. But when you start reffing, you can't think about what you did in terms of playing. It's a different animal, as you know, David.
Sure.
And your eyes are changed differently. Your recognition of contacts that are legal and not illegal. You know, you have to learn how to recognize all of that. And so a lot of my starting days started with the Saboa organization, because I lived in the Bronx at that time. And that was an organization that was definitely trying to help minority officials, predominantly African and some Hispanics, to be trained well enough to engage these conferences and tryouts to show that we could do it, you know? So
sure.
I know when I came to the NBA, I think I was either the 5th or the 6th minority person. We had one Mexican in Tommy Nunez, and the rest, by the way, one of your alumni mates, Hugh Evans, was
Sure.
a boys high person, boys and girls high person. I worked a lot with Hugh Evans, but there was Capers was a New York City guy. He was in the NBA. Jess Thompson was a lieutenant colonel from the service, and he was in the NBA.
And don't forget Lee Jones.
And the great Lee Jones out of Jamaica, Queens, who's a wonderful, wonderful man. He's the one that said to me, you ought to think about being the director when I got hurt. And I said, the director? Absolutely. I just didn't have the profile of previous directors. You know, I'd been hurt. You know, I wanted to do something like that. But anyway, and of course, the last one was Hugh Hollins, who was an LA guy. So So we started out, and at that time there was only 31 officials. There wasn't the 3-person at that time.
Okay.
So I was very conscientious of the fact that I was representing, many of us, and certainly my city, and who I was in basketball, and it ended up being people that they know me for that, officiating. They don't know me from any basketball prowess or baseball joys or anything else. So I'm very fortunate. That's how it happened.
People sit in the stands, they watch the game, but they don't know the game from an officiating perspective. What is it that people don't know about the game or about officiating that you want to get across right now, and just to clear it up, because they have their their perceptions, their understanding, and I know they're fans because they only see the game through the lens of the fan, but they don't know about officiating. And what do you want to clear up right now?
Well, the thing to clean up is I didn't know about officiating either until I got into it. And that's a fair statement for all of us,
Sure.
whether you're a fan of the game, or you play in the game, or you're coaching the game. Until you become a referee in the game, you start understanding the standards of calls, the standards of modicum that has to be presented in the game for people to participate in the game. Those are the things people on the outside don't know what that is, and sometimes they have to legislate things in basketball so you can remove the things that occur if you don't have those particular things legislated. For example, like 2 hands on a perimeter dribbler is an automatic foul. Now, years ago, you can have a hand on a dribbler. When I tried out for the Knicks, when Walt Frazier and Dick Barnett put their hand on me, I was done. I said, well, I ain't got the speed of Tiny Archibald or any of those folks. But the hand check really made it tough to be a pro player.
Okay.
As the years went on, we were noticing, and the NBA was noticing, that some of the great players, like a New Yorker like Kenny Anderson, who, if he had a hand on him, he really couldn't get past anybody, or Muggsy Bogues, or even a kid like a young man like Steph Curry today. If you put that hand check of the 70s and 80s, early 80s on him, he wouldn't be able to free himself as well to get the shot. So we wanted a more fluid game that the traditionalists of basketball wanted anyway. Mm-hmm. So hand checking became a thing that we had to contain and contend with. And then it kind of like had a version of it. Like, for example, you couldn't have a stiff arm on a dribbler. You couldn't have a stayed hand. Well, what's a stayed hand? Well, about 2 seconds or 2.5 at the most, you got to get your hand off. Because a hand and an arm is very powerful in terms of catching up with a player. If somebody beats you and you have your hand, you can actually hold him to catch up with him again, to be a better defender on a play. So they started legislating things like post-up play. You couldn't use 2 forearms. You can't use 2 hands. You can't use a lifted knee to dislodge a player. And the same issues for, back downs. I mean, how do you referee Shaquille O'Neal on a back down? What's the criteria? Well, the criteria is my defender attempting to hold his ground? And if he is, and Shaquille turns real hard and dislodges him noticeably enough and overtly, it's an offensive foul. So the bigs, they're slick. They end up, I give you a little bump here, I give you another little bump here, and now they're getting to where they can score. And sometimes the people don't know how many of those bumps all of a sudden that the referee says, you know what, you're gaining an advantage, you're dislodging, and I can't let you play like that. So the subtleness of 3 bumps to back down somebody versus the initial bump that's a clear out type of thing, they're both the same fouls. They just show up differently. So when you think about all the little things that are going on with rebounding and whatnot, and all the other parts of the game, I made a thing called Nunn's 9, and Nunn's 9 is the most prominent fouls that players make in each game. And those kind of things is what we talk about when I talk about basketball refereeing. And the other part is you can almost referee a game if you had no rules at all about contact with these 4 letters, RSBQ. The rhythm, balance, you
Speed and
know,
quickness.
the speed and quickness of a player is affected. You
Sure.
know, rhythm, speed, balance, and quickness. I always remember that as RSBQ, just like RSVP. So I
Mm-hmm.
never forget it. So if the rhythm is gone and the speed is affected, the balance is affected, for example, in jumping or rebounding, and the quickness of someone is affected, you probably have a foul.
That's right.
And that's the way to kind of work it. Now, some leagues, like, you know, in college, they have their little guideline. NBA has their guideline, but that's about it. Now, fans don't know all that stuff,
That's right.
and it's great because when I did become the director, Adam Silver thought that I could be a good, I guess, expositor of this. And that's when I got on the Making the Call with Ronnie Nunn show on NBA TV. That was his mindset about bringing fans in. We'd
Sure.
educate them. We also had two calls that came in
Mm-hmm.
that people wanted to answer a question. Then we also had a section on the controversial call of the week.
Sure,
Were
sure.
we right? Were we wrong? And the NBA was trying then, and they still continue to try to be very transparent. So
Yeah.
in that time of my life as a director, I learned a lot more about all of this basketball stuff that was going on in marketing of the game, how rules can change to market the game better. You know, let's minimize timeouts in the last 2 minutes to 60 seconds, because people with television, they're going to scan and maybe leave the television show.
Television, sure.
Timeouts are killing the end of the game. So all these things come all into one full circle. And I got a big education in officiating because of these opportunities. So yeah, I try to talk to fans all the time. I have a Twitter account, None Better Refs on Twitter. People write in and ask, Ronnie, was this the right call? Was this the right? I ask them to send me the film. They do. So I have a working relationship still with fans, and I really love it.
So let me bring this up, Ronnie. You know, you've thrown out. I love talking to someone of your status and your experience, because you bring up names that's like legendary, athletes from back in the day, some of the day. You know, when you got in the league in '84, these were some of the names of the players that were playing. You know, Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, Bernard King, Dominique Wilkins, Moses Malone, Ralph Sampson, Jabbar, you know, legendary names, Julius Erving. I got a list here that I'm reading from.
Yeah, you should. It reminds me too.
Yeah, Magic. So you are on the court at the same time that these legendary players are playing the game, and you're the official in the game. And I'm sure you've had some difficult experiences on the court. And what would you say was the most difficult thing about being an NBA ref?
I think that the most difficult thing about refereeing in the NBA was two things. One is your call accuracy, your decision making. Because if you're a good decision maker, you have less issues than people coming at you. When you start making mistakes, they come at you more. The second was how to manage young men. And, you know, my first degree, much like your own, is in physical education.
That's right.
And I remember when I got back into sports, my dad wasn't really high on it because, you know, even though sports had helped me a lot, he was for it, but it was always about education. So I said to him, well, you know, I'm going into refereeing. You know, here I am getting ready to leave teaching to go into refereeing, and he wasn't too happy about it. So I said, well, the first time I'm gonna give a little shot back out of my father. I said, well, what about refereeing? Do you know anything about it? And he said right away, he said, refereeing is first sergeant work. You got to be fair, firm, and approachable. And you got to manage the men so they respond to your call on what's needed to be done. And that whistle is like running the gym. You're nothing but a phys ed teacher running a gym. Run the gym properly.
Right,
You want to use a double toot, and the kids got to grab the balls and go to one knee, which it needs to do. And if anybody didn't do that, they'd have to sit out 5 minutes or 2 minutes before they can return to play.
That's right.
So I used to think about my father. I used to think about phys ed and saying, I need to manage these young men so they can play to their best ability, but also to get them to understand that they're not victims. You know, you're not a victim. If I make a mistake, it's honest. And you got to kind of get that to them so they believe you. And I was always under the belief that you can have 99 of 100 calls correct. if they don't like you, they don't trust you.
That's right.
Your accuracy don't mean that much.
That's right.
But if you can get 90 and miss 10, they look at you and they go, Ronnie, I got hit on that. I didn't see it. I'm going to try harder. And they said, no problem, because they recognized that I was trying to get the plays right. Now you got to get the plays right, but the bottom line was they recognized that I didn't have any agenda, that I was not going to discipline them based on giving them calls and not giving them calls, or or things of that nature that sometimes is in this folklore, of basketball officiating on how to manage young men. I didn't deal with that. If it was a technical where we couldn't get it together, or somebody did something that I thought was undermining my masculinity or trying to take advantage of me because I was a ref, I would issue the technical foul, and I'd wait sometimes just to see if I can engage so I can avoid it. So, one thing about officiating, it reminds me of the social class of life. Every time I speak to officials, regardless of their background, I welcome them to the minority population of the basketball game. You are minority people.
Yeah, I like that.
People don't care about you. People don't think about you except for whatever you can do for them to win. So all of you, from whatever background you come from, you are the minority. They love the players, they love the coaches, and you're just like necessary if we have to have you. But frankly, we really don't want you. But
absolutely.
I try to introduce people to joining the group and say, you now know what minority life is like.
Absolutely.
People speak down at you. They degrade you. They think you're less intelligent. There's a whole lot of things. And of course, you have to build yourself up like we all do who are minorities into doing more than just passing the grade, but being very, very good at what you do, and then standing for what you do is right. And it's a righteousness about that work.
For those of you who are just joining us, this is Beyond the Culture, and my guest today is former National Basketball Association referee Ronnie Nunn. Ronnie, your bio said that you officiated in 4 NBA finals.
Yeah.
And I have a list. It said from 98 to 2002.
Yeah.
And so if anything that I have wrong, please correct me. But what I want you to do is, when I mention the series, I just want you to tell me the first thing that comes to your mind about that series.
Okay.
And obviously it would be the game that you worked. 1998, Bulls Jazz. That was the last year of Michael Jordan. And what comes to mind about that series that you ref, Bulls Jazz?
Well, no matter what, and even though I had accomplished a lot prior, the finals are something. It's really something. First of all, it was in Chicago. I think I may have had game 4 or game 3. I remember, there's 12 of us that go into the finals. And the first thing I remember was the clutter of cameras and people on the basketball court. And some years back, I started running. Most officials come out, they stretch, they do this and that. And later on, of course, they put a bicycle in the locker room, which helps, and players take advantage of that too. But I used to like to run the sideline just to get loose without anybody noticing, and it was going on pretty well. But I know in that game, I couldn't move, I couldn't run or do anything. So that was the first impact of the enormity of a finals event in the NBA. The good news was I didn't have to do much reffing too tough. I was with Dick Bavetta and Hugh Hollins, and Dick, of course, became a Hall of Famer, and Hugh Hollins, God rest his soul, he's gone from us, but I was refereeing with them, and, the Bulls were too much for Utah because they had the 1-2 punch of Stockton and Malone, another 2 great players in my era. So it was kind of an easier game because it became lopsided.
Sure.
The first half wasn't, but the second half was, and I was just wiping my brow going, I'm glad I got out of this without any controversy. So that's the biggest one. The next one, just real quickly, because you talk about each of the ones that came about, was the Knicks against San Antonio.
That's right. 99 for the Knicks fans.
Like 99. And you know, it was the only game the Knicks won. So the problem there was I had another game now with Dick Pavetta in the finals, and we're both New Yorkers.
Oh, wow. That's
So
right.
that became a news item. You know, you got two New Yorkers, and that's why the Knicks won. And then, of course, that was the only game they won. So it makes it look even worse. So, but you know, Popovich, Coach, you know, Popovich was really a super guy, and he liked me all the while. So some things that are on the floor are not really the reality that people write about in the papers or on television. You know,
Sure.
everybody knew the scoop. The San Antonio just didn't make baskets at the right time, even though they had Duncan and Robinson, and of course the other group that's there. But the Knicks were you had the fans behind them, and they just, you know, home court advantage has to do with the emotional impact, you know, of a team, and that's how come teams kind of win more at the home court instead of people thinking, you know, they're getting a home job because it's you know, the refs are going to go with that. The other game I did, I think, was with Philly and the Lakers.
2001.
Yeah, 2001, and at that game, I worked with Steve Jarry, Bernie Fryer, and myself, which was more my contemporaries.
Sure.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm with that group. That's why I miss not having my career continue to grow, you know, in that the new group of people. So that game was interesting because Allen Iverson really was tremendous, you know, and to see him play, you know, against Kobe and these guys, I mean, he was carrying the whole team, and that was a great event to see him play and do real well at. And then the final one I had was the Lakers and the Indiana Pacers. And I remember making a call late in the game, very late, against Rick Fox for the Lakers. And it was an away from the play foul that I just could not avoid. I mean, you know, you look at plays and you go, okay, I'm gonna let the line go a little wider in this contact. But if you go to wider than that, I got to call a foul. So anyway, I think the foul was the foul prior to a throw-in, which is a one shot plus the ball. Mm-hmm. So the one ball they get, they make the one shot, Indiana, and Reggie is, you know, he's going to get the ball, try to tie the game. So I think he's going to try to tie it, but he doesn't go to tie it. They get the ball in, he runs to the corner, he shoots it, and he misses, and they lose, right?
Okay.
So several years later, when I was in directorship here, role with the NBA, I could talk to various players and teams and what have you. And I got Reggie one day after about 5 or 6 years. I said, Reggie, remember the play? And of course, players remember, they know right away.
Never forget.
I said, I called a foul on Rick Fox. That was a foul, no question. And I figured you were going to tie the game. Why did you run to the corner and take the three and miss it? Which I'm talking to a guy that makes a three just like he makes a two, you know?
Exactly.
So he said, Ronnie, a two wouldn't have got it. They would have beat us in the overtime period. I needed to make the three to just get him right then and there. It was either do or die. I said, oh, I get it now. Okay, I got you. Because, you know, here's where you go. I'm a referee, but I'm not thinking all the way like a referee. I'm thinking a little bit like a player, and here's a player with the right answer. There was no way we were going to beat them in the overtime. They're just too powerful. I had to take that shot then. So that was the 4 incidents of game, plus all the calls that were in each game and whatnot. And then that's when I got hurt, and I couldn't. That next year I got hurt, and I couldn't join the 03 finals group. I stepped out after the second round, and my knee was just, I couldn't get up and down. I didn't want to embarrass myself.
Sure.
And I just left it. And then July, there was this, we want to make you the director. So I was quite in shock. I was ready for something like that, but not, I would have liked to have been assistant principal at a school for a few years.
I hear you.
You know?
So listen, you became the director of officiating, and you did that for 5 years. Just quickly tell us what was the responsibility of the director?
Well, at that time, the director also had like 4 assistants, just like a principal would have 4 assistant principals, maybe in a school. And they took care of monitoring 15 people in their group. So there's about 60 referees at that time. So my job was the education of them, the advancement of them, the promotions of them, the demotions of them. And another thing that was put on me, which was very hard for referees to accept, was these 4 symbols of call decisions.
Okay.
Correct call, incorrect call, correct no call,
Yes.
and then incorrect no call.
Yes, I remember
You
that.
know, I think I got them right there.
Uh-huh.
So anyway, when this came about, data was created.
Mm-hmm.
And the officials really balked at this system that was brought on by the NBA. This was not my, my initiative, but I had to carry it out. And I really believed we could do it because we really had really good, going back to baseball, we really had good throwers throwing strikes. I mean, it wasn't, you can only be as good as a human being can be. I know we were at they were talking about 95% accuracy, but that was on calls made.
Mm-hmm.
If you put in all these other little pieces to it, we were probably somewhere between 85 and 88, but nobody would know it because everybody knows that 85 to 88, when I was monitoring that, we were having a darn good game.
Right.
So I didn't like when the NBA wanted to keep producing the 95. It's like saying, we're all hitting what Ted Williams did at 400 plus. And I said, well, that ain't true because there's only one guy that did that. The real good hitters are probably 330 to 360 that win the batting crown, or something of that nature. So I think marketing wise, it seemed to me that 85 to 88, which was more truthful to get people, but the fans will say 85, 88, that's not A-level work.
Right.
So I could understand how the NBA was talking, but inside I knew that percentage was the real percentage. So I think the galvanizing of the guys, some believe I was a little tougher than I should have been, but I never knew what was going on with everybody else in the game because when I did my game and I get on the plane next day, I look at USA Today. I'm traveling from Sacramento, maybe to Phoenix, and I look at Milwaukee. There's 3 techs, 2 ejections, and I say, I know they ain't looking at my game, to really work out of my game. That must have been a hell of a game. So that became the focal point. But when I got to the NBA, I saw a lot of things that I think we could have really gotten better at. And I didn't realize that because I wasn't the receiver of all these complaints. And when I saw the complaints, many of the coaches were right in their reasoning of certain things. And we had to build a better consistency and a better accuracy. And I used to work a lot on mechanics because I believe mechanics will put you in the right place and give you a better opportunity to make the right call. So whatever it was, I did my best. I think I uplifted them at the time. And then, of course, unfortunately, I had an incident with a gentleman named Tim Donaghy. And he was on my watch as the head of officials at that time. And it was a very powerful thing. I remember my daughter coming down to me who worked in PR and said, Dad, you really have to be ready that you may not be in this position next year. And first of all, I was kind of embarrassed that my daughter is going to tell me about this,
Sure.
But that was,
well, Ronnie, could you just as much as you can, just kind of give us an understanding of what the issue was, because some people may not know, and you brought it up, just as much as you can, to kind of give us an understanding of what happened and then why, as you said, you were in danger of losing your position.
Yeah, I was in danger of losing my position because when you're in charge and something overtly and worldwide something happens where a referee is cheating and he's a gambler and he's gambling on the difference in the score. And by the way, Tim Donaghy was a talented official.
Yes, he was.
I know he had some little quirks about his personality, but he was a talented official. So apparently for a couple of years, he had gotten involved with some homeboys who ended up being a little bit in the criminal side. And, Tim was the kind of guy, like, and you can understand this in Brooklyn, where you go and you want to go down to the corner of the luncheonette, you want to pick up the paper, you whatever, and you go. But Tim was a guy who wanted to go back in the luncheonette and hang out and sit around and talk about maybe horses or other gambling things. And all of a sudden he got lured into this. He's a bright guy. I think he thought he could beat it. And then I think if it's true for what he says, he couldn't get out. So, all those things are what they are. I'm sorry that the NBA security program did not pick up on him sooner. There were other little telltale signs about his behavior general outside of that. And then it just it became that immense where, listen, if you have a referee that's cheating, that can rock the entire league, because then they believe maybe others are doing it.
That's right.
And David Stern was at his best in protecting us and doing a massive evaluation and investigation of all of us. And we came out, fine. And we continue to this day. But that was the most awful experience and that I had, because I really wasn't finished with my work.
Okay.
And I wanted to complete my work for the guys, whatever amount of years I would have more to do that. And I felt for the first time like maybe a college coach, where you have a job, you recruited these people, you're going with them. Maybe you didn't win that year that well or whatever, a couple of years, but you're doing well, and all of a sudden they replace you. And when you're replaced as director of officials in the NBA, there is not a lot of places you can go, because it's at the high level. There's always a little bit of a confrontational thing of philosophies or whatever with college conferences. So I couldn't go there because I didn't launch from the conference. I launched from the inner city park, but the good Lord has made a way for me to continue to be embraced by others outside of our country. And I'm so happy that I can continue to teach this craft in a varied amount of ways, having to do with on the court and off the court, as it has to do with officiating in life. So, I'm satisfied, and I go back to a simple thing: Thy will be done.
Exactly.
So whatever He has for me, I get it, because it took me to that location in my mind, in my heart, because something had undermined me and the things I was trying to do right. And then I just realized it's better for me to follow whatever the good Lord has for me. And He's blessed me tremendously with family and children and son-in-laws. I think I got the right knuckleheads for my girls here, So, and I have a wonderful wife of 44 plus years, and
wow.
Our patience with me has given her sainthood, for sure. So I always say, I'm the good Lord's most difficult servant, and what patience and grace, He's put upon me to be here with you, who has the same thing,
That's
which
right.
is a wonderful thing to share and talk to you about, because we're all trying to do
That's
the right
right.
thing, and then when something goes down that's not so comfortable, I can get through it because of that faith that I have. I got to be a better Christian now. Don't misunderstand me. But because of my faith, I'm able to do it, and all that I have is really immense.
Well, Ronnie, listen, that story, and I'm glad you shared that, because it teaches us that, sometimes the unexpected things in life happen to us. Nothing we planned, nothing we wanted, but it does happen. And but it's always how you deal with it, how you handle it, how you recover from it.
Yes.
And I think that that's what makes us a winner, that we come through those things that are hurtful and painful and can really rock our world. But with the grace of God, we do come through. We're getting ready to close. I do want you to just to quickly talk about your camp, because there may be someone out there that's want to get into officiating. So just talk about the None Better Referees Camp.
Yeah, the None Better Refs Camp is nonebetterrefs.com. It is usually in the summer. I usually have two camps, one in LA and one in the East here in either Massachusetts. I've always tried to get one around in New York, but I haven't been able to get it with a tournament group. But yes, I do have it. This year, I work with this minor league. So the West Camp is going to be in Vegas, July 13th to 16th. It has to do with pro-oriented players. So I think it would help anybody that is trying to be a D1 official or trying to be on the NBA's tryout list. And some are on that and in the NBA program, the grassroots program. So they've been working the league. It's been an immense help to them. And that's nonebetterrefs.com. Just get in there and see what's going on. I may have a second camp this summer or not, but we certainly have the first one in Vegas. It's second time I've been in Vegas. It's a good environment to do it. strange as it seems, it's really, we just talked about gambling, but it's a good environment for basketball. Many people are funneling to Vegas for many reasons in terms of sports.
Well, Ronnie, I want to thank you for coming on the show today. You have been a outstanding individual. You've encouraged us. You gave us inside information about actually being in the NBA, talking about the great players that we all know and love, and that you were on the court at the same time with them, handling them, managing them, disciplining them when necessary, and then also patting them on the back, because that's what you have to do as a referee. So I want to take the time to thank you for coming on the show. And as I say to all of my guests, you have gone beyond the culture, and I thank you for joining me.
Thank you, David, and it's a pleasure to be with you. You're a special person, and I'm honored to be with you.
All right, Ron, take care. Now, if you want to continue to hear inspiring interviews like the one you heard today, I want you to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite streaming platform. Also, rate the show and please leave a comment. I would also love it if you would share this podcast with your friends to let them know that we're on. Finally, you can email me at beyondtheculturepodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. This is your host, Dr. David M. Walker, and we'll talk again on Beyond the Culture. Take care.